This is literally a neurological process happening in your prefrontal cortex that determines whether you'll stick to your plans or give in again. In this video, I'll explain how the discipline mechanism works and how to hack it. After 5 years of studying how habits are formed, I've come to the conclusion that discipline isn't an innate gift, but a physical resource of the brain. Researcher Roy Baumeister spent decades studying why people lose self-control. He discovered that willpower isn't an abstract concept, but a depletable resource, kind of like a battery charge. And here's what that means in practice. When you're faced with a choice, eat a salad or a burger, go work out or stay in bed, your brain starts to assess the energy cost of each action, and at that moment, two systems in your head come into conflict. The first is the striatum. The striatum is part of the primitive brain responsible for instant rewards and seeking pleasure. It tells you, eat this now, rest now, it's safe and feels good. The second system is the prefrontal cortex, your inner manager. It's responsible for long-term planning and understanding consequences. When you choose instant gratification over a long-term goal, the striatum wins. And this is called executive control deficit. The problem gets worse if you don't train this skill. Every time you give into an impulse, you strengthen the neural pathways responsible for impulsivity. The brain gets used to taking the path of least resistance. Your discipline muscle atrophies, and your pleasure center becomes hypersensitive. But is it possible to rewire your brain to work the other way around? The answer is surprisingly simple, but it requires mindfulness. You don't need to lower the starting price. Self-control uses up glucose and cognitive resources. If a task seems overwhelming, the prefrontal cortex simply shuts down, handing control over to the ancient brain. To break this cycle, use the 2-minute rule method. Want to start running? Your goal isn't to run 5 kilometers, but just to put on your sneakers. Want to write a book? The goal is to write just 1 sentence. Step 1. Impulse identification. When you feel the urge to get distracted, just acknowledge it and observe that feeling. That's my striatum craving dopamine. Simply naming the process activates the rational areas of the brain and weakens the grip of the impulse. Step 2. Make the choice so easy that your brain has no reason to protest. You're not fighting yourself. You're simply changing the scale of the task. The powerful effect of this approach is confirmed by Walter's classic marshmallow test. Michelle, the children were offered 1 sweet now or 2 if they waited. Those who were able to wait used cooling tactics. They turned away from the sweetness or imagined it as a picture rather than a real object. They weren't enduring it in the literal sense. They were changing their perception of the situation. Disciplined people aren't those with iron willpower, but those who know how to manage their environment and attention, so they don't waste willpower for nothing.
My name is John Walker, and I'm giving away $100,000 on my Telegram channel, where every third participant can win $3,000. I'll also tell you about the trading strategy that changed my life and helped me earn over $30,000 a month. I left all the links in the comments below this video. Click here right now.
A lot of people think, I'm just not motivated enough. But motivation is a chemical surge, and that surge is unstable. Discipline, on the other hand, is the architecture of our brain. You often fall into the trap of moral licensing. When you do something good, like work for an hour, your brain gives you permission to do something bad, like eat dessert. This is a cognitive distortion that resets your progress. Here's another mask. The what the hell effect. If you slip up a little on your diet or skip a day of working out, your brain says, well, since everything's already ruined, might as well go all out. This is the trap of guilt. The amygdala once again tries to escape negativity through pleasure in order to break this. To break the cycle, you need to learn self-compassion. Research shows that people who forgive themselves for minor slip-ups get back on track much faster than those who beat themselves up. If the prefrontal cortex acts as the director, then there's another critically important area in the brain that neurobiologists call the true hub of willpower, the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. Recent studies show that the size of this area is directly correlated with how well a person can make themselves do things they don't want to do. Unlike other areas, the AMCC is remarkably plastic. When you push through resistance, like going to the gym in the rain or working on a boring report, this area physically increases in size. As soon as you start indulging your weaknesses and avoiding challenges, this area shrinks. In superagers, people who maintain sharp cognitive abilities into their 80s and 90s, the volume of the AMCC is comparable to that of young people. To young people, discipline literally keeps the brain young. This changes the paradigm. We shouldn't be treating willpower as some abstract concept, but rather a specific physical structure in the brain through measured, mindful discomfort. The dopamine threshold. The original text mentioned that the striatum requires dopamine. However, it's important to understand the difference between baseline and peak dopamine levels. Modern people live in a state of dopamine flooding. Social media, video games, and fast food create powerful physical spikes. The problem is that after every sharp spike in dopamine, there's inevitably a drop below the baseline level. When your baseline dopamine level is low due to constant stimulation, any task that requires effort doesn't just seem hard, it feels unbearably painful. Discipline is impossible without periods of boredom. By limiting artificial stimuli, you restore your receptor sensitivity. This makes the prefrontal cortex more effective and better at managing impulses, as the cry of the striatum grows quieter. Many people think procrastination is just laziness, but neurobiology sees it as a conflict between the brain's default mode network and the executive attention network. When you sit down to work but find yourself scrolling through your feed 5 minutes later, it means your default mode network has taken over. Practicing mindfulness physically strengthens the connections that allow the executive network to quiet the noise of the default mode network. This lets you focus on a task not by sheer willpower, but by reducing internal resistance. Our brain is a visual organ. Almost 50% of the cortex is involved in processing visual information. Disciplined people often use choice architecture. If you want to build a habit, it needs to be visually obvious. If you want to break a habit, it needs to be invisible. Let me give you a simple example. Keeping your phone in another room while you work isn't an act of willpower. It's about managing your environment with your frontal cortex. You don't have to waste energy suppressing the urge to check notifications if the trigger itself, the phone, isn't there, in your line of sight. Neural priming, like laying out your workout clothes the night before, triggers anticipation of the action at the neural level. Even before you wake up, an unfinished task becomes the main enemy of discipline on a biological level. The Zeigarnik effect says that the brain keeps all open loops in active memory. Each of these loops requires a microdose of energy from the frontal cortex. By midday, even if you haven't done anything, you might feel drained just from the weight of unfinished thoughts. The solution: memory dump. Writing the task down on paper tricks your brain into believing the process is under control. This frees up resources to focus on the present moment. We're social animals, and our discipline is often tied to oxytocin and the fear of social exclusion. When you announce your goal publicly, the amygdala gets involved, fearing a loss of status within the group. That fear can become a temporary fuel for discipline when your internal resources are running on empty. Being around people with strong discipline infects your brain through mirror neurons. You start to imitate the behavior of those around you without any conscious effort. The deepest level of change is moving from I do to I am. James Clear popularized the concept of identity-based atomic habits. From a neurobiological perspective, this is the formation of stable neural ensembles that define yourself. If you say, I'm trying to quit smoking, you're still a smoker. You're just fighting with yourself. If you say, I don't smoke, your prefrontal cortex doesn't argue. Your actions simply match your internal map of reality. Discipline isn't a war with yourself, it's a fine-tuning of your biological computer. By understanding how the ACC works, dopamine cycles, and the architecture of choice, you stop being a hostage to the impulses of the striatum. That's true mastery. Self-management means, first, building up your ACC mass through micro-discomfort. Second, protect your baseline dopamine by avoiding cheap substitutes. Third, automate decisions using if-then rules. Fourth, forgive mistakes so you don't let the amygdala block your progress with guilt. Remember, your brain has limitless neuroplasticity. Every choice you make today is a command to rewire your neural network. Who you become a year from now depends on which neural pathway you strengthen in the next minute. Let me know in the comments what you like the most. And of course, I'll see you in the next video.